Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome everyone into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Everyone, welcome into the program. Today on the show we have, not so much computer and technology news, although this is headlines, but it is going to be a heavy emphasis on, what else? Cybersecurity, because we have a resident cybersecurity expert, the one, the only, Mr. Scott Schober, be joining us here in just a moment. And if you want to find out more about his works, his writings, his speaking engagements, and everything that he does, he's a busy guy, so we really appreciate the time every month that he lends to us. And scottschober.com. We'll have a link to that in the show notes for today's program. Be sure to check that out. Now, in the meantime, everyone, computeramerica.com, as I mentioned, will have show notes, it will have the podcast, it will have the live video feed, it will have video archives, articles, reviews, it will have everything. So if you're driving, if your hands are tied, we hope you get out of whatever situation you're in and you are able to find us on our website. While you're there, be sure to give us a like, give us a follow on social media. Best way to keep up to date with that. And yeah, that's enough self-plugging. Let's go ahead and get today's show started because I'm looking forward to it. Since Scott was since Scott was last on, yeah, a lot of cyber news, and some we did cover, some we didn't. But hey, it's definitely good to have his point of view and his expertise to comment on it as well. So everyone, welcome onto the program once again, Mr. Scott Schober. Scott, welcome back.
Hey, great to be back with you here, Ben.
Yeah, happy to have you. And and this just, I don't know if I should be saying this, but obviously people on the video portion can see you. You look good. Have you lost weight? And I mean that sincerely.
I'm actually trying to. I'm drinking I don't know if you can see that, my water here. Mm-hmm. Trying not to eat late at night, and I'm started to exercise. I did spend a lot of this weekend a couple-mile walk, and I did a lot of ice skating because the lake was frozen up by our cabin, and that is exhausting. So I think that shaved a few pounds off. I think it's safe to say. Unfortunately, I did slip and fall on my butt, which wasn't fun. But aside from that, I had a great time with the kids.
Well, I'm glad you did. And ice skating sounds like a lot of fun. Get in while you can, because I know a lot of the weather has been changing. But weather aside, welcome back onto the show. Before we get started, why don't we go ahead and give everyone an introduction who may be new to you. Tell us about Scott Schober and what your mission is here on the program.
Absolutely. I'm heavily invested in the world of cybersecurity, so I'm constantly learning about cybersecurity from a lot of my colleagues and hopefully imparting and sharing and teaching others and sharing tips and so on and so forth as I analyze different cybersecurity breaches. And it's been a lot of fun. It allowed me to author books on it. I speak at a lot of different industry events. And then, of course, it parallels a lot of the development, the efforts that we're doing, innovation about our wireless threat detection tools that we sell to cyber agencies, DoD agencies to keep classified information secure.
Perfect. And of course, again, we highly recommend the website. You have this set up beautifully with all your different videos and everything that you do. So definitely go check that out. But I think a good way to kind of start this out would be with a number of topics that you've sent over. We've collected some from, yours are from the past couple of days, and so are mine. And it's just current events when it comes to cybersecurity. So actually, maybe a good way to, kind of transition a little better into this would be what catches your eye, because there's so much that is happening in, in the cybersecurity field that, it can't just be, random security flaw here that, you seem to come to the table with a bit more interesting stuff. What catches your eye when you look at everything happening in cybersecurity?
I think what really stands out, and I think it's unfortunately on everybody's mind, just a little bit of that uncertain fear with this whole potential war, World War III with Russia and Ukraine. I have
That's a
some
big one.
concerns. A lot of my colleagues do. We all do, because it affects everybody one way or another, whether it's people's lives, which you feel bad for on the other side over there in Europe, or even at the gas pump over here, maybe closer to home. But it's I think the most important thing is the affecting of people's lives, and we are affected even with the world of cybersecurity, because Russia continually is putting out cyber attacks, whether we like it or not. It has not stopped. It's only increased despite all the things that America's done. And I think they've done a lot of things to counter it, but it still keeps happening. And I guess that's one of the standouts that I'm seeing again and again. That's a big concern.
Yeah, and I know that there's already talk about sanctions, and that gets into a whole geopolitical side of the show that that we really don't have expertise in. But as far as some of the commentary I've seen from it, random people on the internet are one thing, but some of the sanctions include financial pressure and stuff like that. But maybe even one of the pressures I've heard discussed was, essentially cutting off their internet, cutting Russia off from the World Wide Web at large. And societal, ethical reasons aside, I wonder what that would do to the cybersecurity landscape, because obviously you could have VPNs. Everyone in the world would have to not allow Russian traffic, because they could just, kind of reroute wherever, you shut down Russia and then suddenly Belarus has incredible traffic, or, random Southeast Asian country would have crazy traffic. I'm just wondering, from a cybersecurity point of view, how much a internet kind of lockdown or blockade would actually affect cybercrime in the world, like at large.
I think you make a fabulous point. I think they would find the workarounds, and I think back to some of the antics that went on with North Korea, and often as they dug in, a lot of the research that came out, a lot of the pipe, I guess you could say, and the traffic and things went through China. So sometimes a ally will quietly allow traffic and not block things without anybody knowing it. And again, it can be disguised with VPNs and other tools that they have at their disposal. They could easily hide under the radar and still cause that same havoc. It does add another layer. It makes it more work and effort, and allows probably the good guys, if you call it the good guys, in America, to analyze it and follow the traffic and things like that, and hopefully prevent it from happening. But I think it's kind of interesting that they're willing to go to that level. I always think of the internet as open, free for every person on the world that wants to access it, as opposed to a type of censored internet where certainly China does that, and certain countries do actually censor and prevent certain content. I think that's a bad way to go when things are actually centered from, again, just from my personal opinion.
Right.
So we'll see what happens. But there's been a lot of attacks. I mean, especially on Ukraine, the poor people there. The banks have been targeted. Some of the defense industry has been targeted. There's been a lot of focused attacks just in the recent weeks that I think make it difficult or almost crippling when they're trying to put up a defense to say, hey, we're trying to keep our nation sound without having Russia come back here and try to take parts of it or all of it over. And now all these other things are happening. It just becomes a big mess.
So I'm sure since this was kind of published, and we did cover on the show what you're talking about, this is the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, the official website, and we're going to go ahead and refresh the page. I'm hoping it does it. There was essentially a Cloudflare, wait 5 seconds while we determine that you're not a bot kind of deal. And actually, I came and refresh the page. I guess you just get one shot. But yeah, they had to mitigate a massive DDoS attack, which we've covered often. They're very simple, but they're very effective. I'm wondering, Scott, like, that was kind of like the first thing, and it seemed so basic, but I guess in terms of modern warfare, and not the game, but actual real life, like knocking out some of people's, I guess, the functionality of their communications network seemed to be just something that Russia just kind of said, All right, this takes a very small part of our resources. DDoS, the Department of Defense.com, and DDoS, the major banking apps and stuff like that, and it causes just, I guess, another headline. Like, what do you think was the goal? Because I can't imagine that if, Department of Defense.Ukraine goes down, that the entire military stands there going, sir, we can't log into our tanks. I don't know what to do. Like, I'm sure it didn't do that much from a military side, but from, I guess, a, citizen side, it had some effect.
Yeah, I kind of look at it as more of a strategic move, almost like in the military, they'll shoot a shot across the bow. They're not intentionally trying to hit somebody and inflict physical damage. Here, it's almost sending an emotional statement to them saying, hey, look what we have the power to do. This is only one of many cyber tools that we can use to cause chaos, disruption, mess up your communication. And that can be scary. I always relate it this way, and we've suffered repeated DDoS attacks. I share my first book, Hacked Again. But if you've ever had, maybe the closest thing to it, have you ever had a day when your company's internet is down, or even home personal, when your internet's down, it almost feels like you're paralyzed. It's hard to function because we email, and maybe we use voice over IP phones, and we go on websites, and we check our Facebook page, and all the things we're so dependent on that internet. When it's not there, you really, really notice it. So we can see how paralyzing it could be. Now, that's just talking about a company or an individual. Now imagine a country or a website that's tied into a country, I should say, is taken down from a DDoS attack. That can start to be crippling. And at least it makes you feel that way. And you scramble. Well, what are we going to do here? We're going to have to shift over to another means of communication, guys, quick.
Yeah. And of course, reading this article that we're going to have in the show notes, I see some statements from you, kind of personal ways that you can avoid this. But I guess DDoS is one of those attacks that, regardless of what you do, and there's of course multi-factor authentication, for security and stuff like that. I think there's also ways that you can mitigate DDoS that you can work with your provider to do. But still, it's one of those things that when you say it cripples you, it's because there's not there's not somewhere you can go and press buttons and work on it. Like it's out of your control, and it feels debilitating because there's nothing you can do. Either wait it out or pay a lot of money and get it mitigated. It's a very awkward place to be. So the entire country of Ukraine seems to have bounced back from that. They again seem like they've installed Cloudflare on their kind of central infrastructure. But we're going to move on from this topic. But I did just want to say one more time, Scott, that this feels like the future of kind of warfare. It's like, it's just what you do. You're going to DDoS everything. You're going to hack everything. You're going to cause as many headlines as you can right before you do something catastrophic like roll tanks across the border.
Yeah, I think so. In fact, it's kind of a 1-2 punch. If you look at just all the military lining up, and that's a physical presence that invokes action and fear and all those other terrible things that war does. Now you give it the second punch by starting to do crippling things from a cyber perspective. It makes it harder. Now imagine if Russia were to target critical infrastructure within the country of Ukraine, be it power, the electric grid, which they've done in the past, sewer, water, all of those different things that start to make life really difficult, especially amid wartime. It could be more catastrophic, I think. And I think, like you mentioned the point, there's really no immediate solutions with DDoS attack. To mitigate it takes time, because you got to get somebody in there, do the analysis, so on and so forth. By the time you get somebody there, it probably stopped already. So it's kind of a difficult one to really, the damage is done, basically. The fear is already instilled.
Yeah, and it's not at all easy to mitigate. And then, like you said, like it takes you a while to defend against it, but the attacker, they flip a switch or they redirect their attack, and you're back in the same position. Very effective, but once again, that's always been a tool that Russia has employed quite often. So let's move away from the whole Russian conflict and everything that's happening over there. best wishes that everyone just kind of backs away from that situation. But we can go ahead and move on to some other topics. This one, a couple of weeks ago, I want to say, let's see, this article that I pulled up was from February 13th, so about a week and a half ago. But since you were last on, this happened, and it really did capture, and I have a different article than you, I know that, but New York Times. But still, this captured the internet's, like, it had everything to do with cryptocurrency, money laundering. It had foreign ties. It was international espionage, that kind of deal. And on top of that, it had silly rap videos. And man, did this just terrible rap videos. Indeed, like this captured the public's attention like no other. So tell us about it from your point of view. And because this was like 5 years later, this was the end result of one of the largest Bitcoin heists ever.
And that's one of the things that to me was a standout, because this happened back in 2016 from Hong Kong-based Bitfinex. And that's really, I guess, classified as one of the world's largest virtual currency exchanges. So huge amount of money, 3.6 billion in equivalent Bitcoin. And of course, that goes up and down a lot each day, depending upon that roller coaster of Bitcoin prices. But they're relatively young, in their early 30s, and accused of this a terrible conspiracy to launder. It was almost 120,000 Bitcoins, which is unbelievable amount. And that's typically what is done. I think we've talked about this in the past. When cryptocurrency, typically Bitcoin, is stolen, they like to launder it. They break it down into smaller amounts of coins, and then they'll redistribute it to multiple wallets and move it around, and then transfer it from Bitcoin to Ethereum and so on and so forth, really to cover the tracks and make it really, really difficult for law enforcement to move in. I think the result of this... Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And just real quick, I wanted to kind of mention that one thing that has become so popular is this idea, and this is the website up on the site, but there are a number of them. I guess back in the day, it was kind of a manual process where you had to go, make 1,000 wallets, move the currency around, and then eventually land it somewhere that you want it. There's now these services that they have out there called, this one we're looking at is Tornado Cash. They're big washing services that you just put cryptocurrency in. It does all of that automatically and spits it back out with a minor fee to a brand new wallet that is, hopefully the in-between takes a lot of time to really figure out. So everything that you're talking about, Scott, it feels like in the past couple of months alone has gotten very automated. Like someone has automated this process.
Yeah, and I think that's a fabulous point, because that's what's attracting cyber criminals to it. It's hard to be a criminal and keep up with technology to learn how to launder money, this and that. But when there's automated tools and software and things that can take out the complexities of it, it makes it great for criminals. And again, it's usually just skimming a small fee off the top. And when you're stealing money, what do you have in your power? You have a lot of money. So you can afford to use automated tools, whereas the good guys, law enforcement, they're spending hard dollars to actually catch the bad guys, and they've got a world against them. Now, the part that I laugh about this, and my brother Craig and I, we covered this story the other day on our video podcast, Cyber Coast to Coast, and we couldn't stop laughing when we watched the YouTube video. I think I sent you a clip of it. It was pulled off YouTube, but we found another spot that had the clip up there. And it's just like the worst video. My brother's big into, he's traveled around the world producing music videos, does a lot of art videos and editing and so on and so forth. And this video was just like bottom of the barrel, worst video produced. Some of the language is a little explicit, just so you know, but it is kind of hilarious.
Yeah. Real quick.
Yeah.
So wait, the song's for the entrepreneurs and the hackers, all the misfits and the smart slackers.
You better win. Come real far, but don't know where I'm heading. Motherfucking crocodile wolf.
You're right, and podcast we can listen to that, but still, the music is not great, but it is higher produced than just I guess something than just like a cell phone. Like, Scott, this is again a personal question just for you, but if you knew that you had $4 billion just about sitting in an account, just waiting for you to, I'm sure they were pulling little amounts out, because I think they seized 3.6 billion, but another like 1 billion was already laundered and kind of moved about. I mean, if you knew you had billions sitting there, would you spend your time making rap video? Like, it's the weirdest part about the story, that they have almost unlimited money, and this is what she decides to do, to act like she's some kind of rapping activist for the little guy,
Makes absolutely no sense. And I guess that's the irony of it. It goes back again and again to all the large cyber heists and cyber criminals. There's a sense of pride that they have and bragging rights that always seems to come out. And that in turn actually helps. It helps law enforcement bust these fools, because they don't know what they're doing. All they do is focus their time and energy on bragging to how successful they are. And these guys had dual citizenship. They were American and they were Russian. Mm-hmm. They had, as you mentioned, they're almost $4 billion. They're young. I'm surprised they don't just disappear and find a beach hut in Tahiti or wherever, Fiji or somewhere, and hide, and launder the money and retire. But no, they want to brag about it. So I think they want to shoot.
Yeah, they want to shoot videos directly in front of like the Federal Reserve, like in Wall Street. Yeah. Like, it seems so blatant that brazen. You're right, Scott. It almost seems like their youth might have actually been their downfall, because I guess they thought they were invincible. They couldn't get caught.
Yeah, and it's such a common theme. And talking to some FBI senior agents once. They really stress that. They say they heavily rely upon social media, because the generation of cyber criminals that are doing the best, they're all over social media. And again, obviously they have aliases and they do some tricks to try to stay under the radar, but they blow it when they brag. Eventually they're going to brag. And if you become part of the community, and a lot of this is, the community is in the dark web and it's on social media and things. If you become part of it, pretend you're a crazy rapper and a cyber criminal, eventually they'll welcome you in. So that's what the FBI does. They fool the community. They become part of it, and then they move in and bust the big fish, which is just brilliant, I think.
Yeah, and even some of the pictures that are included in the New York Times show that hey, they even went old school. They went with books and they cut pages out and had secret compartments holding hard drives that that would have the Bitcoin on it. I mean, they tried their best, but that's kind of the thing about being a criminal. You have to be perfect 100% of the time, because that one time you slip up, that's what law enforcement is going to pick up on, and that's how they're going to eventually unravel that whole thing. So I'm glad that you brought this back to our attention. Man, that one was certainly something else. And really, that cryptocurrency now is in the hands of the feds. I'm going to ask you last question about this. What do you think happens to this money? Because I believe Bitfinex has already refunded everyone, either that or the entire exchange went away. I'm not sure which. But what happens to the confiscated Bitcoin? Does that stay in an evidence locker forever, or do you think the Fed has a right to, I guess, kind of liquidate it as assets?
Well, in some cases, and this would be very similar to the laws of seizure of large sums of money, if it's proven criminal and this and that, if it's not, doesn't have to be returned to the rightful owner because of the criminal association to it, they can use it for future investigations and things like that. So my leaning would be, and I would be for it if they ask my opinion on it, say, hey, use that toward education, use that toward training and more effective law enforcement to stop the bad guys, because oftentimes they go after the big fish to send a message to all the other guys, the wannabe hackers that want to create dumb rap videos and other things like that. So they're not tempted to go that path and say, oh, geez, if they caught these guys, what's preventing from catching us? Let's think before we jump into this, guys.
Right. I'm hoping that they're a bit smart, and like my immediate reaction is hold it, and if they have to do anything, any kind of transaction online, they can then, hey, just pull from this. But I guess the other part of me is like, well, all of those 120,000 Bitcoins are probably flagged, and as soon as one of them, as soon as they see that, this client just paid in one of these 120,000 Bitcoin, this guy's probably a cop, and so they're gonna have to find a way to. Ironically, they're gonna have to launder it themselves, or they're gonna have to figure out some way to just turn it into cash, because. Scott, I feel like those coins are kind of quote unquote dead because they were associated with this heist.
Yeah, and in fact, that's one actually tactic that nobody talks about it much, but I know law enforcement has done, is they've actually started to blacklist certain digital wallets and crypto. So that way, when it's associated to a specific heist and things, it kind of becomes dead money. And now other people don't want it. And everybody kind of backs away from it, which is kind of an effective tactic. It's like the money bag when the ink blows up on it and it's marked money, and you get that blue ink all over your face and everything else. Everyone sees that, they run and say, "Oh, I want no association. These guys are going to get nailed here." Similar type of tactic, the marking, I think. So, hey, whatever they have at their use, I think should be used, and they should try to seize all this that they can. And again, if they can't return it to its rightful owner, they should have the use of it themselves to improve law enforcement.
Right. So yeah, there you go. And they got caught. That's a huge, I guess, kind of win for law enforcement. And again, psychologically, I'm sure it puts people on edge, saying, well, cryptocurrency isn't as foolproof, bulletproof as we all think it is. Law enforcement is getting better at tracking it. And honestly, a lot of these organizations are your clients, Scott. They're just going to keep getting better and better at it. Like it's crypto's not the safe haven it used to be anymore, where it was the Wild West. No one knew what to do with it, and it was safe. It seems like the tides are turning just a little bit.
Oh yeah, and I think just talking with law enforcement, I feel bad for the amount of man hours and investment, time and money that they have to put in. And sometimes this takes a year, 2 years or more just to trail and get close enough so they could actually move in and pounce on the bad guys. So huge investment that they put in to catch these guys. And these guys are using, as you mentioned, automated tools to launder and all kinds of things to really disguise themselves and stay off the radar. So it's a true cat and mouse game, that's for sure. But nice to see a win on this side for law enforcement.
Absolutely. So speaking of, I guess a game of cat and mouse, and as always, encryption versus decryption. This next story that you brought us is a bit old school, because the source of encryption is, one way that you redact things is to pixelate them, and you end up with this image, that if you're watching the video portion, you can kind of see it there. And honestly, like if you break it down, 1 shade of gray, 2 shade of gray, 3 shade of gray, and, pixelation normally is very, very good at hiding information, because it turns, very fine detail into giant blocks of just kind of blank data. It's hard to really extrapolate from that. Scott, you found the story. I hadn't even seen this before, but man, this almost feels like a game changer, because it takes pixelation out of the equation to an extent.
Yeah, I think it's just fabulous too. If anyone does have time to the story you have up there, watch the video, because it actually explains it better than anybody could ever just explain it, because the visual component of it is what I think really comes into play here. And it's just brilliant, I think. And this researcher, the shout out to him, Dan Petro, he was a offensive security firm, Bishop Fox. He demonstrated, and it's an open source tool, which is kind of cool, I think, too. And he called it Unredactor, taking so it can reconstruct that text to the pixelated images. And the process is just amazing to me. And at the end of it all, what does this mean is what kind of I was curious about. It means that I was wrong. I always thought, well, if something's redacted and it's blurred out, it's secure. Wrong. And probably everybody else out there feels the same way or felt the same way. The only way to properly do it is to 100% black it out. And we may see that on some of these shows on TV now. You'll see it blurred. But it's when you see it has a complete black line over and throughout the text, not just a strike through. That's the only proper way to ensure efficient redaction, I would say, and true security.
Yeah, there was a story, and by the way, like good accurate redaction is very hard to kind of deal with. But I'm immediately drawn back to a story. I think it was back in 2013. Was it this one or a different story? But actually, I don't think it was that one, but no, there was one where a government organization was in charge of redacting their documents, and they went on Microsoft Word or whatever, and they highlighted everything they wanted to redact and turned it to, turn the color to black. So anyone could just copy and paste the entire text document, paste it into another text document and remove the formatting, and bam, all of the text was quote unquote unredacted because they didn't do it right. I mean, they've had some mess ups, and so proper redaction works, but there's a lot of also improper redaction. So I would not be surprised if this tool comes in handy someday.
Yeah, I think I just love it, and how it helps the process. But again, using automation and advanced algorithms for it. Probably a few years ago, this would have been pretty tricky to do, I would think. But now with the algorithms and speed and stuff, it's just incredible.
Yeah. So very, very cool in there. And I think, Scott, so that's just for text, and it's working with that. Just to put another little thought into everyone's head, I think thanks to artificial intelligence, I think I remember one that could do the same thing with faces and images on top of that. So, sometimes they blur out people's faces before they post them. They have AI that can kind of say, reconstruct that from the pixelation as well. So, machine learning, it's changing a lot. That's absolutely for sure. So there you go. So there's that one. I wanted to jump over real quick into one of the last topics that you kind of brought up, because this involves you and a number of other experts in your field. I believe this is this is a podcast, and looks like there's also a video component to it, but you're talking about an ongoing issue that's affecting everyone, which is the supply chain crisis. And it really has started reaching crisis proportions. There are products that cannot be made. There are cars that cannot be sold. Like there are real issues. But you're tackling it from a slightly different perspective, because this has to do with, really the cyber side, which I think a lot of people would think, well, if it's purely digital, how can there be any kind of shortage? How can there be any kind of, problem? What did you guys talk about?
Yeah, we did dive into this, and we had some good laughs on this, and some great colleagues here. I've known Tyler Cohen-Wood for many years. I spoke with her out at RSA a couple of years back. She worked at the White House there for a number of years. Chuck Brooks, he's a very well-known researcher, again, in cybersecurity. And the first time I met Matthew Rosenquist, and had some great insight there. And we talked everything across the board about the supply chain. Obviously, prices being driven up because of it, the ships sitting in harbor, but how cyber criminals can use some of these problems to their advantage if they really want to disrupt the supply chain in the future, which is so ironic that this now is almost kind of crisscrosses with the potential for this happening even with Russia and Ukraine. I hate to bring that subject up again and get political, but it kind of crisscrosses into that again. Of course. Because a lot of stuff with what Homeland Security is doing and trying to improve this crisis, because right now it is a crisis. We're struggling as a company, and a lot of the companies we deal with are all dealing with the same thing. We can't get electronic components in. We can't get things shipped. We can't get things off of container ships fast enough still. If I have to wait 4 to 6 months to get something off of a container ship, I can't. And what do I do instead? I push it through air, which is, doubled and tripled in price sometimes. So the cost of everything, that individual component now, has skyrocketed. And again, cyber criminals are using this to their advantage. And the other thing that's happening is there's a huge percentage of fake goods that are entering the world. What I mean by fake goods, this is not like the ripoff Gucci pocketbooks, but imagine that in the world of electronics. It's happening, and it's real, and it's devastating to the supply chain, to contract manufacturing, to production cycles, we often think about high volume. We think about, Apple Computer manufacturing phones. But in between that, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of companies that are running products, constantly trying to build things and keep up. And now they have to worry about their cybersecurity footprint, and is it in danger in connection with this whole supply chain. So it's the perfect storm for making life really difficult for everybody.
Good to know that this issue isn't going well. I guess bad to know. I mean, really, when you guys talked about this, did you get to any kind of like specific end date? Because I think I've heard, people who are pretty connected, like the CEO of Intel and stuff like that, saying that the chip shortage alone, like, not even all the products, but the chip shortage is supposed to last until like into 2024, maybe even 2025 at this point. Do we have an end date when all this finally clears up?
Yeah, I'm told it will be softening in 2025 with all the projections that I'm hearing. I can give you an example. I put some parts, critical parts, and these are manufactured over in Switzerland, actually, on order last November. And my delivery date was February 2023. And that's before things got really nasty. Now things have gotten even worse. That same type of order, if I put it, it's pushed out to 2024, 2025. So if I'm a small company that does have production and planning and everything, normally our cycle is about a 6 month. That 6 month has now been pushed out to 2 years roughly. How do you plan for product and introducing new things and R&D and development and the cycling of that when you can't really predict? It's almost, it's taking a dart and throwing it against the wall and trying to see what calendar date you hit. You really don't know. And that's catastrophic for many companies. So I think it's going to mess up things and take, for example, we talked about one thing, think about 5G build out. Suddenly you have this momentous push with billions and billions of dollars. Infrastructure was actually built, put out there, mostly by Huawei, which represented about 65 of the 5G infrastructure around the globe. Now imagine most countries where that infrastructure of 5G equipment is out there, it's being removed and now replaced by the Ericssons and Nokias and other countries that are approved because they're non-5G Huawei equipment. That was a big setback. Now to build that equipment to fill the gaps, so you can see it's kind of a problem that just has got legs to it. Yeah, it's really sad.
And speaking of very sad, you mentioned Ericsson there, which, I think a lot of countries, not even companies, but countries have been turning to Ericsson to supply their antennas and radio transmitters and stuff like that. But then obviously Ericsson, we're not going to get into it, but they kind of sort of maybe paid ISIS to, kind of assure that their supply chains were able to get where they were going. Crazy stuff with the whole Ericsson thing.
Yeah, because now you see large companies, and I won't name any specific ones because they're our customers and we buy from them. It's crisscrosses, but they supply finished goods, they supply components, they supply communications to the broadband industry, but there's connections between government, politicians, corruption. It's so intertwined that it makes one wonder how any of this stuff actually works. Yeah. And I think it's gotten a lot more complex in the world of communications and telecommunications than it ever has been.
Right. Okay. So moving on from that topic, we can, kind of move on from there. And I have a couple of stories. One actually that you reminded me of when we talked about another topic. I'm trying to think of what I think it had to do with one of the other topics that we talked about here, but I wanted to bring this up. This just happened a couple of days as well. I remember. It was the whole Russian thing. You were kind of mentioning potential allies, and I got to say that China, most notably, they are doing what Russia's doing as well. In terms that, like, Russia is DDoSing and doing other forms of cyber attacks because they know it's low cost, high effect. The value proposition is immense. And I think that Twitter just got around to, with this whole Olympics happening in Beijing and everything happening there, I think China is doing the exact same thing where the benefit, the cost analysis only makes sense. Twitter has suspended about 3,000 bot accounts that were promoting Chinese propaganda on its platform. And, we don't need to get into specifically what it was, but I did want your reaction to kind of say that, talking about new norms, it seems like I'm sure that every country in the world is going to go out there and have their own promotion bot army.
Yeah. And I think oftentimes some of these bots are used in conjunction with actual paid accounts. So the bots, the dispensing mechanism, or bots, I should say, bot armies. And so in other words, there's money that is being funneled or paid to Twitter. It's really hard as a company to say, I want to cancel this account or 3,000 accounts if it starts to affect your bottom line and revenue, when these are advertisers paying to promote their propaganda. So Twitter really has to walk a fine line, because if you really read their terms and conditions, and if there's fake accounts, they say that they have to pull them or will pull them. So oftentimes these large companies will say, well, we're investigating this and we're working through it, blah, 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 because they don't want to step on the wrong foot. A lot of this we saw back with Donald Trump even, and a lot of the things being pulled or removed. So censorship is very difficult to do when you're a social media platform, when it affects one pocket. So you have to be careful, I think, not to upset the whole horse cart.
Yeah, and that's what I was kind of thinking about as well. Like, Facebook has this issue, Twitter has this issue. How much of it is about law enforcement identifying it and reporting it to, whatever organization you would report this to, and how much is this, Scott, of just Twitter needs to do better to more quickly identify bots? Because there's clearly some coordinated behavior, but I guess it can also be kind of difficult to kind of tell, because let's face it, I'm sure that there were hundreds of thousands or millions of people on social media talking about the Olympics and trying to pick people out talking about this specific thing about the Olympics. I mean, Scott, I know some people's reaction was, oh, wow, they finally got around to banning these bots after the Olympics. And if you look at it, it was these 3,000 bots were banned during the Olympics, but the report came out after. And even they were still banning them even after the Olympics were over. It's hard to, I guess, kind of deal with this in real time.
Yeah, it is. You'd think it could be dealt with immediately, but I often think of this. I saw a tweet that I put out. It was almost a year ago. And this morning I saw somebody retweet it and comment on it. I said, oh, that's interesting. This is, and usually I think of Twitter as fresh current news,
right?
But people don't check their feed all the time. So some of this stuff has long lasting effects from these fake accounts, and the propaganda that they're pushing out there may last over a period of weeks or months or longer. And that does have influence on people, and people share with their groups. So you can see how it kind of goes viral, and it can actually start to shape people's thoughts, beliefs, change their mindset on, what their core values are at some point, if they see it and hear it enough. And that's what starts to happen with these.
Yeah, and social media is a whole can of worms that I don't think we're even So social media is not in its final form, Scott. I think you and I can both agree on that. These companies have gotten very good at taking data, manipulating conversation, and just, really, I mean, let's face it. They make money when you click on things. They make money when you read things. So, hey, if you get more outrage than, a random company does A, who really cares? But, can you believe company B did this? I can't believe it myself. And, people are going to click on B and read B at a 5 times, click on story B at a 5 times higher rate. Guess what gets promoted? Social media is not in its final form, but man, is it in a weird place right now. That's for sure. Okay, so there's that story. Let's go ahead. We covered that story. Okay, so we have 3 more stories besides, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap this up, try to keep this under an hour. But everyone, I wanted to draw attention to this one. This should just be an update. We covered this lately, but people hey, it's almost tax time. April 15th is coming quick. And I think a lot of people are, I think even the IRS themselves kind of said, get your taxes in as soon as you can because we're facing a labor crunch just like everyone else. So, submit your taxes. And one of the new ways, because the IRS likes to embrace ways to streamline the process, make it more simple, that whole good thing, they wanted to utilize a product, and I believe it was called .id. ID.me, which is a third-party service that they partnered with to use facial recognition to identify who is filing and essentially like third-party verify that you are who you say you are and the right person gets the tax return. Scott, I really feel like there was no ill will, there was no ill intent in the IRS doing this, but as soon as you talk about facial recognition and government and something that you can't not file your taxes, that you physically have to do, this put a lot of people on edge. What did you think about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I was kind of surprised, but again, I shouldn't be surprised with some of the stuff the government does because in hindsight, you look back and you always learn, why did they do that? For them just to authenticate and keep record, they're going to lose it. It's going to be hacked. You don't want to lose your facial recognition for somebody to authenticate and log into something else in the future. That's one aspect. The other thing is it's been proven that the facial recognition technology, it's not consistent. And unfortunately, it doesn't work well with anybody of certain color and things of that sort. So now naturally, it's not fair. And I think that's part of the problem. They weren't prepared for the onslaught of customer service issues. I think they actually standardized on this in 27 states, I read in one article. It's turned into a basket case, and they're also purporting that you have to use it. As a matter of fact, I had a friend yesterday text me and said he got this notice from the IRS. He's trying to do his tax filing and stuff, and it's demanding or requiring that if he doesn't go on by this much time and authenticate himself, that it's going to be some penalty or something. And he got all up in arms. Is this legit? Is this true? It's causing mass confusion for people this year in tax time. Big mistake, government.
Yeah, it definitely a big mistake. I think the big news here is that they've walked that back. You can now identify in other ways. I'm sure things like taking a picture of your ID and sending it in, stuff like that. But they're going back more traditional. ID.me, and I just received an email about this from an activist in North Carolina. I guess so. The IRS on a national level, on a federal level, they walked back on this. The email that I received from someone in North Carolina was getting signatures because I guess state taxes, they're still requiring ID.me. So, even though it's not happening on a national level, on a state by state, this could be happening when you file your taxes or you find yourself filing your taxes here soon. I don't know, facial recognition, like you said, it has so many problems, but do you think it's kind of an eventuality that, the government would really like to have this kind of technology? I mean, boy, would it make their job so much easier.
Yeah, and you know what? And I'm a big proponent of facial recognition and authentication because it does work when it's done right, when it's implemented right. Unfortunately, this third party that administered it and the problems, the training, getting up to speed, it's just been from day one, nothing but problems from everything that I've read. And that's part of the challenge. So it's hard to get something, an archaic system, and now put some modern technology in it and still keep it secure. And then you throw into the mix the government, not to badmouth the government, but everything they touch seems to have problems with it. So I don't want them, I don't trust them holding my personal information, my facial, footprint there. So I think for all of those reasons, they should just use more traditional things until the technology is more proven, pilot it and put it out there to improve efficiencies. And it also opens Pandora's box. This is a haven for cyber criminals now. When things like this happen, this disruption, now suddenly you're going to see a wave of phishing emails, luring people in to click on something to fool them about, to go to another fake website of IRS. And, you don't have to authenticate, but instead we'll authenticate you properly with the secure method and get glean other little bits and pieces from us that if we're not aware. So everybody should be on high guard and be very cautious. Phone scams and email phishing attempts to garnish more information from you.
Right. Yeah. And honestly, like, the data sets are there. I remember talking about stories that states are partnering with these organizations to process images from driver's license photos. Amazon, of course, has a very powerful facial recognition system that they've contracted with the government. If you've ever flown, the TSA has another powerful system for pre-check and checking people before they board planes. I mean, these systems, they're, Scott, like right now they're kind of mixes and pieces and parts all over the place, but these are going to come together in the next couple of years, and they're going to have a powerful tool, hopefully for good. But yeah, everything seems to be pointing that way. That's for sure.
Yeah, so, I think it is with time.
Yeah,
with time it'll get better.
With time, there's still so many problems, like you pointed out, but with time, everything is set up. Okay, so the last story that we're going to talk about, because the idea of tracking someone using an Apple tag is so obvious. Apple has already put in a lot, like before Apple had no protections. Before they were actually launched, Apple decided, hey, let's alert people that if there's an Apple tag that is not, synced or paired with their phone, alert them sometime between, alert them 48 hours after. People complained, Apple rolled that to alert the person between hours 18 and 48 that they have an Apple tag that is traveling with them. And so they, gave it that a little bit of randomness so that people couldn't be tracked. Now, here we are, the 15.4 iOS beta, they're adding even more language to this to kind of say, if you're using an Apple tag to track someone, that's illegal and you could get in trouble. Don't do that. Just little parts, Scott, here and there that just kind of say, well, these Apple tags, there's, the ability for abuse or the possibility of abuse, that's not going away anytime soon with a consumer product like this.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great story. It's not going away anytime soon. And I think for Apple, they are always associating their brand with premier security and having, their user base confident that their information is protected and it's not going to be misused. I think maybe they got to market a little too quick here, and that's a big mistake, and maybe shame on them, because GPS trackers have been used for a lot of stalking incidents, a lot of bad guys, a lot of mischief that's going on out there for years. Now you take almost an improved version of it, an AirTag, which costs nothing. I mean, you can buy these for $25, $30 or something like that, or and they're not using any type of paid connections like a GPS tracker. You got to have a cellular connection that you're paying a certain amount per month. And the fact that it's using Apple's ecosystem and really, like, in a sense, crowdsourcing all of the iPhones out there to determine the location of somebody, it's a little scary. And I use them. They're fun. They're great. You hook it on your dog. If your dog gets lost, I keep one on my bag. There's good uses, but the stalkerish side of it and the privacy implications are kind of creepy. So I'm glad they're doing something about it. I think public outcry is really driving them to do it, because it will affect their customer base. It'll affect the stock price eventually. So we'll see more as this unfolds, I think. But good steps they're taking. I think the fact that they're going to alert you quicker that a tag is near you that you didn't realize. There's just the fact, though, that everybody doesn't have an Apple device. It's hard. And part of their argument is, well, hey, you can download an app on your Android phone if you want to see if somebody's trying to track you. That's a dumb answer. I don't like that. Cop out.
That's actually just what I was looking up, and I kind of got the idea rolling in my head was that Android is open source. Like, that's a pretty big thing. If you wanted to make your own distribution, you don't have to follow just Android. You can make your own distribution of, the operating system. I'm wondering, Scott, could Apple submit a change to the kernel that might be accepted by, let's see, I think it's overseen by a collaborative effort by 4,000 different developers. I'm wondering if Apple could submit a change to the kernel and allow any Android device to pick up on kind of where's my iPhone ecosystem, and essentially let that functionality happen by default in every Android phone as well. That might be something, obviously Apple doesn't want to give away too much of what makes them unique or separates them from Android. But if they want to keep offering this product, I feel like something like that might have to happen.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant idea. I don't think it'll ever happen because they're not going to go over to the dark side and do that, I don't think. And I think part of Apple's success as a hardware company is that they tie in hardware sales. You don't just buy an AirTag. You have an iPhone, an iPad, a laptop, a computer, headsets, and so on. So you're buying into their overall ecosystem, and you're on Apple TV and Apple Music, and you're subscribing to this larger ecosystem, and that's where the revenue comes in. And ask anybody that's an Apple person, they probably, and I always joke around, I'll ask, okay, what Apple devices do you have? And before you know it, you realize that they've got family sharing on, and they've got the music and the movies and everything under the sun that Apple puts out there, their Apple Watch, so on and so forth. They're heavily invested, and they're buying kind of into the system, the security, the loyalty, and they're probably overpaying for it. Admittedly, I always say that we pay a premium for Apple products because it makes us feel good. We have perceived security. We have convenience. It's easier to use is the concept typically thought about, not in all cases, but for the most part. And I've got a lot of friends that I go back and forth with, and we joke around and jab one another because they're anti-Apple. So oftentimes you'll see that you kind of take sides, just like somebody might root for a certain sports team. That's what's kind of happening in the world of technology. People join a certain camp or another because they feel a perception, a level of security involved. And I think to some degree, that's this perception they're trying to really stop, because it is a great technology. It's great hardware, especially the fact that the accuracy of this tag is much better than tags of the past, the tiles and other things, with the use of ultra wideband that's using really low frequencies there. Super precision information is really cool. I don't know how valuable it is, but it's really cool. And I think that's what Apple always wants to improve, the cool factor and the tech factor. And then they're doing it. They just got to make sure it's secure and keep everybody happy.
I think you're absolutely right on that one. And the premium does come, but so does the functionality and the interconnectedness. Apple is, but like of all the products, back in the day, an Apple, an Apple, not conspiracy, but kerfluffle, an Apple talking point that people had was, the iPhone 3GS, you're holding it wrong. It's not like the antennas were installed improperly and, you couldn't block the signal with your hand or anything like that. No, like that used to be the controversy, but now the controversy is, does Apple enable, people to track others? And that might be just a bad enough headline that they might have to do something drastic with the Apple AirTag. Maybe. They have walked back on things like, Scott, what was that technology they were going to use to scan people's pictures, for exploited children and stuff like that? Like they have walked back products before.
Yeah, and I think one would hope, and again, I don't know if you're an Apple fan or not, but one would hope that someone that is an Apple fan is going to stand behind a company that does the right thing. And that's what the thought process. It's not always about corporate profit, even though they're the largest company in the world as far as stock valuation, things of that sort. So they're doing something right, but to buy that customer loyalty, it's done over years, and they're very careful with their look, the image, the branding, the functionality. It goes back decades. It's not just a new thing. So I think they have a lot to lose if they're not careful on this one, and I think they'll do the right thing.
Can certainly hope so. So there's that. Scott, we're going to kind of start wrapping this up here, but before we do anything else, I wanted to, of course, bring up the RSA conference because you mentioned this in the show notes, and I wanted to give everyone a kind of a heads up. This is your next speaking engagement. I believe it's been pushed back to June of this year, but talk about RSA conference, what it is, and I believe it's going to be with Cybercrime Magazine.
Yeah, so I'm excited to be out there with Cybercrime Magazine again. I was there. It's been 2 years ago, right when the pandemic hit. I was there for a couple days and had some great interviews, great conversations, and all of a sudden we all started having to wash our hands and wear masks, not knowing what in the world was what was going to happen. Now, fast forward 2 years down, it's back again. They shifted. They were going to try for February. It didn't happen, because it would be right around this time frame, but they shifted it to June, and it's going to be an actual live event, and there'll be a virtual component also, I'm sure. Maybe attendance will be a little lighter, but I'm really excited to be there. I'm going to be the media commentator for Cybercrime Magazine, and they're lining up some awesome interviews and great conversations. So I'll be there for the duration. I think it's 3 to 4 days. So anybody that is going out to RSA in person, certainly shout out, reach out to me. I'd love to connect and have a conversation and meet up with you and learn what you did.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think I heard, telltale or rumors that maybe the CDC is going to start recommending to get rid of the mask mandate and things like that. So I'm hoping, especially by June, it may just be a normal event, and that sounds like the best thing in the world to me. So I hope that you have a lot of fun. I hope that Cybercrime Magazine and all of your colleagues get a lot out of it. I'm hoping a truly return to normal, and it's just a great show. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and play the music right there in the background. So Scott, that means that we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Sorry for keeping you long, but this was a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to next month. Everyone, you can set your clocks to it. Last Wednesday of every month is dedicated to Scott Schober, and it's all about cybersecurity. So Scott, thank you for coming back on.
All right. Stay safe, everyone. Thanks again, Ben.
Perfect. Everyone, we're going to go ahead and kind of end that there. Until next time, computeramerica.com, show notes, link to our guest website, everything. Catch you there. Bye, everyone.